Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this panel discussion today. I'd like to start this event by acknowledging the traditional owners of the waterways and the lands where we're all joining from today. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I'd also like to pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are joining this event today. My name is Cassie DeRider. I'm from the Family Reconciliation Mediation Program at MCM. If you're not familiar with FRMP, as we call it, we're a statewide program funded by the Victorian Government to support the youth homelessness sector. We do that via two main streams, the first being brokerage funding for young people to access therapeutic support in the context of family breakdown. The second stream is our sector capacity building work, including training, forums, and today's panel. I'll add everyone to our quarterly newsletter so you can keep up to date on our future events, but please let me know if you don't want to be added. So, what brings us here today? When families break down through conflict, separation, or instability, young people often face emotional and practical challenges that disrupt their connection to school. This panel came about due to a demand from the youth homelessness sector to better understand school can't, but also school engagement issues more broadly in the context of family breakdown. Earlier in the year, I surveyed workers in the youth homelessness sector about what questions they have on this topic, and the questions that came out of that survey will form the basis of the discussion today. We'll be hearing from experts about how we can support young people who are struggling to attend school. There will be some time, however, at the end of the discussion for extra questions. So if there is something you'd like to ask the panel, you can upload it into Slido. There's some instructions here on how to access Slido. So please take a moment to get that going on your phone if you'd like to. If you'd like a particular panelist to answer the question, please include their name. We won't be able to answer everyone's questions as we have quite a few people joining today. But with Slido, you can see all the questions and upvote any that you'd really like addressed. Please note that the panel is being recorded, so keep that in mind when you post your questions. And while you're getting Slido up and running, I'll quickly introduce our panel. So our panel facilitator is Sally Laslett, who's the Executive Principal of Hester Hornbrook Academy. We also have Glenn Melvin, who's the Associate Professor, School of Psychology at Deakin University. We have Hayley Prasad, who's a Youth Expert Project and Training Officer at the Brotherhood of St Laurence and also joins us as a lived experience panellist. We have Jodi Long, Educational Research Lead at David Scott School, Brotherhood of St Laurence. And we also have Noeleen Denby, Operations Manager Living Learning at Hester Hornbrook Academy. Richard Crawshaw, who's a re-engagement specialist and parent advocate at Can't Face School. And finally, we have Tiffany Westphal, a founding board member and director of School Can't Australia, also joining us with lived experience of School Can't. I'll stop sharing now and I'll hand over to Sally Laslett, who will be facilitating the discussion today. Thank you, Sally. I'll just highlight you now.
Thanks, Cassie, and hi everyone. It's great to be here today. As Cassie said, I'm Sally Laslett. I'm the Executive Principal of Hester Hornbrook Academy. I'm just going to give you a quick insight to Hester and then we'll go with our questions and off to our panel members. So in 2019, I started at Hester Hornbrook Academy. We had approximately 90 students and today we have 750 students enrolled. We're a special assistance school for young people aged 15 to 25 who are not able to access mainstream or traditional education. Our enrolment criteria requires students to have been disengaged from education for 10 weeks or more. So that might be no school attendance at all, or going to school not achieving any success in the learning environment that they're placed in, and then they move over to us. Our students also need to have a diagnosed or imputed social and emotional disability, and we receive funding from the state and also from the federal government for those young people. The topic that we're talking about today is dear to my heart, given the number of young people who we know in the state of Victoria and who are not in education. So some research that we've done shows us that in excess of 15,000 young people, 15 to 17, are detached or disengaged from education and training. And I know Jodi's here from David Scott, and they do awesome work with the young people that we work with as well in their area of the state of Victoria. I think it shows us that traditional ed is not working for all young people, and I'm really glad to be able to lead a school that does school differently. If you've got any questions for me, you can always email us at HESTA, and I'm happy to answer those. But today is certainly about the panel members that we have with us. So thanks, panel members. And I'm going to work through our questions. Cassie, if I'm not on track, you just bring me back. And we hope that for all of you online, this is really helpful for you in the work that you're doing. So Tiffany, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Can you just talk to us about what is School Can't?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. What is School Can't? It's got lots of different names over the years. It's most commonly been referred to as school refusal. School Can't is the term that the lived experience peer support community here in Australia prefers at this time. It's a disruptive term that's designed to challenge us, to stop us in our tracks and say, hang on a minute, what are we really talking about here? So what we're talking about is either distress about attending school or disengagement from school, and it can occur on a spectrum from mild through to severe distress. It can happen episodically or for short periods of time or for long periods of time. Sometimes it's intermittent. But at School Can't Australia, we understand it as being a response to stress, which is experienced either in the context of school, in the context of home, or in the context of community. And stress is understood to impact one's capacity to engage and participate, access education. I think making sense of it, we've come to understand that it's sort of similar to occupational stress, where there's a mismatch between the demands or expectations and the energy, the skills, or the capacity you have. And when that happens, there's an experience of stress. And we're all designed to sort of manage stress, but when stress becomes a chronic experience, it starts to impact our mental health and our well-being. School Can't Australia has about 16,000, just over 16,000 members of its parent carer community, and it's been going for 10 years, 11 years now actually. It was formed in 2014. And in that time, parents and carers have been sharing information with each other about what works and what doesn't work and what's been helpful and what hasn't. And we've done lots of research together, and we can tell you that for about 30% of our parent carer community, stress in the context of family has impacted their child's experience of being able to attend school. And upwards of 73% of our community are caring for students who are neurodivergent, most commonly autistic or ADHDers, and that would indicate, as Sally said, that mainstream school perhaps needs to be doing things differently in the way of inclusion and better meeting the needs of these students. Notably, School Can't Australia has surveyed families about school-based stresses. We asked about 57 different school-based stresses. On average, parents and carers indicated that their young people were experiencing that about 8 of those school-based stresses applied to them. And we found that out of 57 of those school-based stresses, upwards of 50% of the community selected around 75% of those items as relating to their child's experience. So on the ground, it can look like, you know, a tummy ache. It can look like anxiety. It can look like not being able to get out of bed in the morning. It can look like getting to school in the car and freezing and not being able to get out of the car. And it causes everybody a lot of stress, often causes families a great deal of stress in responding because they're trying to get other kids to school on time, or they're trying to get to work themselves, and they've got this really distressed young person.
Thanks, Tiffany, and thanks for the work that you do with so many families that we know struggle every day. Jodi, it's great to see you here. I'm wondering if you can talk us through, Jodi, how the youth homelessness services can encourage school engagement or find a setting that suits their needs.
Thank you, Sally, and it's great to be here, so thank you. Just a little bit of context, and I think Sally's given a bit of that for our school. We do serve a similar, not identical cohort to Sally. We're a smaller school. We have about 135. We're moving to 150 next year, of young people 15 to 20 at our school, with a focus on young people who have experienced poverty. So homelessness fits it's fairly significant in our school population. About 33% of our students identify that they have experienced housing insecurity, housing precariousness, or homelessness within the past, I think I put the past 18 months was in that survey. So I'm an assistant principal at the school, but I do work in research and advocacy and policy as well. So just so you know the links. So the first thing I would say in response to that question, Sally, is, you know, and I think a lot of you here will be across this, but the importance of including young people in every possible discussion that's about them. So lots of our young people experiencing housing precariousness or homelessness describe constantly that life happens to them rather than with them. And that makes a lot of sense, because if you look at how and where our young people have agency, they often don't. They have limited choice and preferences. And if they do have choice and preference or agency, it's often about the right now. It's not about the future. So I can refuse to do this thing right now because that's the only thing I have control over. So it makes sense for them, in my mind, to take control where they can and where they feel out of control in other aspects of their lives, right? It sort of makes sense. So what can look like school refusal could actually be reinterpreted to gaining a sense of control of something, of anything. So the inclusion of students in every conversation about them is crucial. And if they refuse to come to a meeting or a chat, and I'm not delusional that does happen, just making clear and really transparent invitations that they are welcome, and also transparent acknowledgement that if the meeting has to happen and they are not planning to attend, that you want to take their voice to that table, that you want to include them in the space in whatever way you can. You know, we have to, if they are not able to come to that meeting for whatever it is, just ensuring that they know that we care and that we're holding that space with their voice in it about their educational potential and their educational capabilities if they're unable to do so in that moment. The sense of sort of controlling the immediate, sorry, in a temporal way is actually really deeply held for a lot of our young people that have to live and exist in the moment. It affects when you have to think only about the now and live in this moment to stay safe. It affects the way our brains develop and the way that we process information. So young people with these experiences, they're actually neurologically conditioned to think in the moment, to be alert to the right now, to stay safe. And it's likely kept them safe for what might be coming at them. But because of that, young people that have experiences of homelessness, poverty, or trauma often believe in that idea of fate and destiny rather than believing that they can make choices that will impact their future. So if you believe in fate and destiny, what's the point in going to school if it's not like fun and achieving the things that you need in that moment or meeting the need that you have in that moment? So if you believe, that things happen to me rather than happen with me, then why would you go to school? Like, going to school won't change what happens in my life. And it kind of makes sense because as I've just said, that these young people often have less agency than other young people. So they have to be thinking in the moment about staying safe, where they're staying, who's going to be in their lives, what's happening in the next 5 minutes or the next, not so much the next 5 months or 5 years, which is what school often assumes young people can think about. And actually, I'm going to speak a little bit more about that concept of the future in the next question, and the impact that type of thinking can have on school engagement and feelings of belonging. But going back to involving them in decisions about their education, it's vital. It's really a non-negotiable if you want buy-in. The student in every conversation, it's about a growth opportunity for them, showing them that they can make decisions and have some control, and encouraging that future thinking in sort of small and scaffolded ways. But it's just the easiest and strongest way to kind of ensure that sometimes very elusive buy-in. And we'll talk a bit more about buy-in in the next question too, because I think they're quite similar. So just briefly on finding a setting, I think it's really important to acknowledge a couple of things. One is the misconception that if a young person has been marginalised or excluded or unable to find connection in a mainstream school, there's often an assumption that they must automatically be suitable for a school like ours or a school like Sally's because they're automatically a vocational learner. And it's just not true. Many of the students we see at David Scott School see themselves very much as academic learners, and it's a bit of a system failing within some of the within flexi settings. So at David Scott School, and I'm sure at Sally's School as well, we really try to engage these students in different or expanded ways, but structurally it can be an additional workload, a disadvantage really for young people with traditional academic interests and capabilities to come to vocational only settings. So have a think about who your young person is and how they see themselves. It's just important to consider both pathways and ask, will this school value my young person or value this young person for what they can do rather than what they can't do? So are they being seen for their capabilities? Is there someone at the school who has all of the information with the young person's consent, obviously, with their permission? Do they have all the information about this young person to understand their context, understand the system that this young person is living in? And is that staff member available and accessible to the young person? I think when you are looking at where to, that idea of being seen for capabilities and potential within the context of their lives is really important. We have at the David Scott School a number of different metrics or measurements about how we define and validate student successes. And we also have formalised metrics about measuring what students say they want to be recognised for, as in we have a learning transcript that's been co-designed by our students around some alternate metrics that's separate to the VPC, VCE, VM certificates that are offered. And this is quite new for us the last couple of years, and it's been super helpful. I'm happy to talk more to that in questions if you're interested, but I'm not sure if I'm just banging on about it because I love it. So if you want more information, ask in the questions, or if it doesn't get asked, feel free to email me. And just one last really quick thing, I think it's important to say, but I'm pretty sure we're all across, it's about just safety and belonging and a sense of community, which is so crucial. Young people who have lived through experiences of homelessness, often, if not always, carry experiences of trauma. And we know that there are some mechanisms that are, small class sizes, small schools where people can recognise faces is actually like familiar faces, consistent staff that behave in a consistent and predictable way across the school, so sort of whole school practices, are really important for these young people. And our students certainly describe the value in that's how they can feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, we all know that they can't learn. It's kind of as simple as that. Thanks, Hayley.
Thanks so much, Jodi, for your response there. Hayley, we're going to move to you now. Just hoping Hayley's there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, great. Hi, Hayley. So, Hayley, we understand that engagement in education is crucial for all young people. How do we ensure school attendance and engagement for a student living in crisis accommodation?
I don't think that's something you can ensure. I think it's meeting a young person where they're at. 110%. Not all young people are going to come into school and be like, yeah, I'm so ready to learn. In my own experiences, I used school as a safe place. I was never in class, ever. My teachers actually hated it. I used to run away from my vice principal because I knew he was going to get me in trouble for not being in full school uniform or something. But my homeroom attendance was basically 100% every day. Every time I was in child protections, out of home care, and every time placement broke down, I was at school without fail, but I was never in class. I had a few friends that had various mental health problems. And at one point, I would call my friend every single morning and I'd be like, hey, good morning. Am I going to see you at school today? And she'd be like, oh, probably not. And I'm like, oh, can you get in the car with your mum just to come say hi? And over weeks, like we would kind of work on that. But for the first few weeks, she'd get in the car, she'd still be in her pajamas. There's no way she was coming into school. But then the next month, she would get dressed for school. She would get out the car and then be like, nope, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, hey, at least you got out the car today. Like you got out of bed. That's a win. And then eventually she would come into school for 5 minutes and I'd be like, look, you stayed for 5 minutes. Who cares if you're even in class? You're taking the right steps that you need to be able to engage back in your education. Like that's not a loss in my eyes. That's a big win. And eventually she started coming to school every day, and half of it was just because I was there. We were in most of our classes together, and I was like, please come to school. I hate it without you. I can't do this. I don't like it. But I think it's very much checking on a young person's readiness. Is school a learning, comfort, or danger zone for them? Because some of the time, like, the actual school environment for me was a comfort zone, but going to classes that didn't feed my needs for my future was just a complete waste of my time in my eyes. And I think that's why I was so disengaged with my education towards the end, being a mainstream student as well, because how is this going to help my future? I would go to school, I didn't learn my taxes, I didn't learn how to do rental agreements or start applying for houses or jobs or anything like that. I knew for a fact that as soon as year 12 finished, I wasn't going to external education because I had to live by myself. I had to do it all by myself from there. And the only way that I could afford to have a life is by going straight into work, which is something that like was never discussed to me, never opened up. And I think it's just that support, checking on a young person's readiness and then finding out what motivates them. A lot of the time, it's not mainstream school. English, I hated English until I did English language in year 11 and 12, which was really, really hard, but really interesting because I wasn't reading books. I was learning about the language itself, which then I helped my niece learn how to speak from that because she had a speech impediment. And I learnt really cool things. Some of the aspects of what I learnt have been helpful in my everyday life, but I know how to do rental agreements and stuff like that, but none of that mattered to my future and where what I knew that I needed to learn because my circumstances were different to all of my friends. My friends could stay with their parents, whereas me, I was living by myself at 17 anyways. And I had an agreement with my principal too, that would get me to school so that I could only deal with the teachers that I liked. I was very argumentative. I would go anybody that would like to argue with me and I knew I could get a reaction out of. And then one day one of my workers told me that I should be a lawyer because I was so good at arguing. And for once in my life, I was like, whoa, like you found one of the things that everybody says, this is such a bad thing for you, and you've turned it into an idea that could be a career for me. And I think that's how I got into my advocacy as well, because I'm very, very good with my words and yeah.
Thanks, Hayley. We love your honest and thoughtful responses. And I think if we listened to young people like you, our education system would be very different, Hayley. Jodi, I'm just wondering if you've got anything else that you'd like to add there.
Look, I've spoken a few times with Hayley, and I always love hearing Hayley speak, and it's always hard to speak after she's spoken because Hayley, that I'm just going to build actually on what you've said from the perspective of a middle-aged educator, because I think what Hayley is saying about motivation factors is really important and can be expanded on a bit, if that's okay, Sally. I think I would just challenge, or it's an odd question, but I'm going to throw it back to everyone here about why. So ensuring school attendance and engagement for students in crisis accommodation, why are we ensuring school attendance and engagement? I'm not suggesting that we don't, but why are we doing it? And loosely, I think the answer is, for most of us, and I know we're not all teachers here, I know there's a whole range of service sector and others, but most of us are educators in some way or another. We are working with young people. We are talking about education. And so I think loosely the answer is, why do we think school attendance and engagement is important? And it's because we are educators. We've built our lives and our careers around this internal belief that's founded in good evidence that education is valuable. And the likelihood is that most of us have felt connected to school in the past. We know that most teachers have had some form of success at school in the past, so they believe in its capacity. Not everyone, I'm aware of that, but the data does say, does tell us who goes into education, and it's true for most of us that we have had success at school in the past. So sometimes we carry this assumption, an untested assumption, that educational connectedness is always of value for the reasons that we believe in. But my challenge to you is that we need to reflect on whether this belief is about our values and whether those values align with the young person's needs or the young person's priorities or values, and whether we're asking the young person or whether we're just making assumptions and pushing our own agenda with very good intentions. It's not a criticism about what we're doing. I'm sure we're all always acting with good intention, but are we making assumptions about what might motivate a young person? Because if we push a story about the importance of school that doesn't resonate or make sense to that young person, or it feels irrelevant, as Hayley just talked about, in their lives, we risk not just being unhelpful in that moment, but actually potentially causing harm. We can unintentionally affirm the idea that school values and my values as a young person, if I was a young person, don't actually align. So it's really, like, I think an important example of this is the story that we often tell young people that I alluded to earlier, that school will serve them well in this elusive future. They'll have more choices, they can get a better job, they'll have a brighter future if they stay at school. And we know this because the data says so. But young people experiencing homelessness or family violence or mental health challenges, and we know these things often intersect, they don't necessarily have the same strong sense of future. And if they do, it might not be an optimistic picture that they've got in their heads. So if a young person is focusing on where they need to sleep tonight or how they'll find safety or what they're going to eat, it doesn't make sense that we're assuming they can think about something in 5 years' time. They're doing exactly what they need to do to survive, and that's not a failing. It's a sensible strategy that they've had to use within their lives. It's not a deficit, it's just their reality and how they have neurologically developed. So when, as Hayley just used the term, meeting students where they're at, this is exactly what this means. It's seeing that young person in the context of their life, understanding why they might not buy into my version of educational importance, a white, middle-aged, middle-class woman's version of why school matters. But it's my job, it's our job, to help each young person find their why, and not just in a tokenistic way. What's in it for them? In their mind as well as in their words. It's not shallow work, this work, and it takes time and it takes genuine self-reflection and openness from us as educators. And I think
Jodi, I am going to have to wind you up.
That's so fine. I just think, well, the last thing I would say is just being aware of the difference between educational attendance and educational engagement. Are they attending or are they engaged? Thanks, Hayley.
And I'm just going to put the question out there. Do they actually need to attend on a physical campus to be engaged in education? I don't think so. Anyway, we're going to move on. Noeleen, I know that you're there, and Noeleen does amazing work in the MCM group and at HESTA. Noeleen, thanks for joining us. Noeleen, can you talk us through how parents and carers can be supported to understand and respond to a young person that's finding it difficult to attend school? We're also going to hear from Gavin and Richard. So, Noeleen, I might have to wind you up to get us all in there.
No worries. Thanks so much, Sally, and thanks everybody for having me. It's really great to be here and a part of this really important discussion. Just for some context, I'm coming from the perspective of the family therapy space. So before I came into Living Learning, which is a program that supports young people with mental health issues and that are significantly disengaged from education, I was really privileged to work with lots of families across Melbourne and lots of schools across Melbourne, so both flexible learning schools and mainstream schools. And one of the things that I really noticed, well, there was some key things that kind of stood out to me that I hope that would be helpful for others, was that when I was working with the parents of these young people, they found it really hard to understand that there were so many different needs that the school environment actually met for the young person. And they, I think, struggled to understand as well that ill mental health, for example, and poor school attendance actually go hand in hand, and that the school environment and being meaningfully a part of the school environment and the community can actually be an antidote to some of those mental health issues. So I guess like the first kind of like learning that I took from that is that providing psychoeducation to parents is really important to get them on board. If we can get them on board and help them align with all of the different needs that the school environment can actually provide, we're much more likely for them to play that active part. And I strongly believe that parents of these young people are so powerful in supporting the young people to influence change. So, for example, I think that a lot of parents don't realise that it's not just about the educational benefits. When we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or that really kind of like basic kind of key learning that we all kind of go through when we first kind of come into this field, safety, for example, like the school environment provides safety, physical safety, emotional safety, that love and belongingness, like what Jodi mentioned before, is crucial. So many young people that have experienced trauma have low self-esteem, and feeling that sense of belonging is so important for them. Another thing is predictability. So another thing that's really important in terms of healing and recovery from trauma, having a predictable day routine, knowing what their week looks like, having purpose in the day is so important for recovery trauma. It's also linked with, you know, when people have a purpose, there's lower decreased kind of incidence of feeling depressed and feeling lonely, feeling anxious. I think another thing as well is routine. Again, routine is crucial in the recovery of trauma. So I think if we can help educate and provide parents with that context, I think that's going to be really important. Another thing that I notice as well is that a lot of our parents of the young people that we work with have themselves experienced trauma. They've experienced adversity, and I think it's really hard for them to feel trust and feel confident in their parenting abilities. A lot of them have you know, worked with child protection, and their parenting has been put under the microscope. They've been critiqued, and I think if we can help them see that even just agreeing to a conversation with us, it shows that they care, they're committed, and they absolutely have the power to support their young people to get to school and to succeed. I think also a strong homeschool link is really important. So if we can help build a bridge between the home environment and the school environment and vice versa, we're going to help build really meaningful relationships and help nurture those relationships, that I think is going to add to the success as well. And I'm conscious of time, so I'll just the last point I'll just make as well is that once we kind of can consider the bigger picture, like there's so much that happens within the family system and within the family environment that we're not aware of. If we can help them align, get them on board, then we need to think of what are the logistical barriers. Is there competing demands for this parent? Is that why it's hard for them to support the young person to get to school? Is there AOD issues? Is there they got their own trauma? What support can we offer? We might not be able to support that one-on-one therapeutic support, but we'll be able to kind of think about how we can help with referrals, for example, and yeah, just having a look at the bigger picture.
Thanks, Noeleen.
Thanks.
Welcome to the conversation, Glenn. I wonder if you've got something else to add there.
Small tech problem there. Thanks, Sally. Great to be here to contribute to the discussion. Noeleen, that was a very comprehensive response there. So I'm a clinical psychologist and researcher sort of in this space. And I guess what came to my mind in response to this one was thinking initially that first, I guess we have to have an appreciation of the wide variety of factors that can influence whether a young person sort of gets to school or not. So I think we have to go into any conversations with parents with that sort of understanding. It could be anxiety, it could be difficulties with teachers, it could be feeling unsafe at school, it could be practical things like transport and equipment that might influence whether there's attendance or not. So I think the other sort of point I think that's really sort of important is to make time to fully sort of listen to the parent and understand sort of their perspective. What's their model of what they think is going on? What do they sort of think is sort of explaining it? And then, of course, we have to listen to the young person and the parent and the school with consent to perhaps put all those sort of pieces together. So we're developing an idea of, well, what are the forces? What's influencing sort of attendance for this particular child or teen at this sort of point in time? And then I think once we have that sort of understanding, our best sort of understanding of what we think is going on, I think our job is trying to communicate that to the parent. And I guess we have to take a very curious sort of mindset to this, to wonder, you know, for every kid, there's reasons behind what and how they're sort of behaving and responding towards sort of school. And then we might need to try and sort of expand, as sort of Noeleen was saying, some psychoeducation or provide the parent with a bit of a model of why the child is sort of understanding. It's very important for the parent to understand what's happening. I think if the parent sort of doesn't understand why the child's not able to get to school, you know, we really need to come back to that and ensure the parent has the understanding, because without that, they're not really able to support in a way I think that's going to be effective. So there might be avoidance, you know, avoiding places that they feel are unsafe, avoiding anxiety or spaces where they're not feeling welcome or they've been fallen out with a teacher, been growled at. Or for some, there might be more lucrative things to do elsewhere that school isn't rewarding. And we have that sort of more immediate sort of sense of the future that doesn't value longer term investment at that point. That's how the young person's sort of seeing it, as we've heard from Jodi sort of earlier. So I think once we have that sort of shared understanding, that sense of sort of what's happening, then we can start looking at what are the needs of the young person, what are the support needs there, and work with a parent who can be very sort of influential. There's good evidence to show that if we support parents, we can indirectly support school attendance. And then I guess on a practical level, I like to think about, well, what are everyone's roles towards supporting the young person back to school? What's the school's role and what's the parent's role? What's needed there? Is it about making the lunches, organising uniform? Where is support needed? Lifts to school, who's going to help with that? So we're very clear about what supports the young person sort of needs and whose role is what, including the role of the parent. I might leave it at that. Thanks, Sally.
Thanks so much, Glenn. Richard, I know that you've got something to offer us here as well.
I do. Thanks, Sally, and thanks, everyone. Yeah, it's a bit hard after those comprehensive answers there, though. Thank you, Noeleen and Glenn. That relates a lot to what we do here at Can't Face School. What I've done just to answer this question is I've just dug into our parent survey responses that we have. I thought that'd be good just to relate to pretty much a lot of what we've just been hearing. So a few common themes from what our parents and carers have requested, saying that they want support with is, and I quote, "I'm having somebody who understands to troubleshoot with regularly." So I think in terms of just what Glenn was talking about and being curious and being listened to, that is a really important starting point for our parents. And I think in terms of approaching any of this work, there's a common phrase I quite a lot mention is you can't throw a solution at something if you don't know the problem first. So that's a really good basis for this. The next thing that parents say are that they want is having someone to put in place plans and structures with the school. And I think when we hear that, I think I do connect that to some trauma-informed work as well. And as a team of ex-assistant principals and principals that Can't Face School, we feel that that's a really important sounding board for us to be able to then go in and work with schools to be able to put in place plans and structures that are going to be realistically going to work for these kids. Another quote that was common was, well, I'm here working with our son, could be child, daughter, whoever. And I think that, yeah, there's some fantastic organisations out there, and I'll talk about those a bit later on in this discussion about working directly with these young people, to be curious with them and to listen to them. Parents are saying as well, yeah, advocating and sharing of our documentation and communication. I think that in terms of the length of some of this work, as has been mentioned, we find it really important just to get some of those consistent patterns happening, as Noeleen was just saying then, so that there is constant monitoring. When we talk a lot about collecting, and I think Jodi was talking about this, not focusing on attendance data, but more on engagement data. What is working and what is not working? And how can we push and pull and change that, weekly or daily, as it were? Parents are also saying that they really appreciate having resources and tools to be supplied to help them at home, and then share them with the school as well, just so that the school are really aware of all that hard work that they are doing at home. And then, yeah, the last one I picked out, which was common, was somebody who involves our child in it, is as many aspects of the plan as possible. And I know student voices has been a theme that's been mentioned, and that's absolutely pinnacle to some of this work.
Thanks so much, Richard, Glenn and Noeleen there. We're moving on to Hayley now. Hayley, we're wondering if you can talk to us about what we can do to support young people to engage with school when parental support is limited or unavailable.
I think, again, it always kind of goes back to the readiness of the young person. But when I was in school, I had some really, really good supports. I remember one thing that stood out to me was I'm a performing arts student, through and through, thick and thin. I love dancing. I love musicals. I'm not a singer. But besides the point, we had VCE dance at my school. I was a dancer for the majority of my life, and I was like, yes, this is something I really, really want to do. My assistant principal made sure it happened when I was in year 10, just so I could do it, because I couldn't do it in year 9. But around like year 10, 11 and 12, when I didn't really have adults in my life, I had 3 teachers at the school that I would go to as my first contact of support. And each semester they would sit down and talk about which one of them were going to come to dance night just to watch me. And it was great. It was so amazing. I felt included. I felt like I belonged, not just with my peers, but like having an adult in the room for me, when that's something that barely ever happens. The only time it happens is in student support group meetings, when it's just me and a bunch of adults telling me what I should do with my life. I also think there's what do they want to do in life? That motivation and inspiration is so important. I work with young people all across the state that are leaving care, and the first thing I say to everybody is what motivates and inspires them, because that inspiration and that motivation is what will engage them in school. One of my friends, extremely academically smart, but wanted to be a carpenter. Spent the last few years in trade school and is now just graduating. But it's the only thing that interests her. It's the only thing that motivates her. It's the only way she can get out of bed in the morning is to go to TAFE, because it's something that inspires her. She enjoys it. Eventually, she wants to have her own company. And I think just finding out what that is and then connecting a young person with that, because it'll help them. I did a vet subject when I was in VCE and I loved it so much. I didn't have to go to school. I could wear free dress. My teachers wouldn't really care that much because they treated us like adults. And then that conversation came in year 11 and year 12 with my principal, and he sat down and he goes, look, Hayley, I know you live by yourself. I know you don't have parents. What can we do to make sure you're still at school? And I was just like, treat me like an adult. Like, you're sitting here treating me like I'm a child, so I'm acting like I'm a child. Every time you argue with me about my piercings or my nails or my uniform, I'm not here for it. Like, why would I want to do that? Eventually, we got nose piercings accepted at our school because I argued so much over the point. But it came down to the fact as well that I thought my school cared more about the way that I looked rather than my actual education. Every time I was actually in class and not wearing full school uniform, somebody came to take me out of class, and I was like, why? I could have just been sitting in class learning that entire day, to then enter the adult world and find out that nobody actually cares what I look like. I have nails extremely long, and all anybody asks me is, how do you type on your laptop, Hayley? It's not how do you do your work, how do you achieve anything. They're just concerned about how I type on my laptop because to them it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand how you guys do anything without nails. I lose a nail and it's like I've lost my lifeline. I don't know what to do, how to act, how to be a human being. But letting them show up how they are, how they want. I used to have a school skirt that went down to my ankles so I could wear my pajamas underneath my school uniform just so I could be warm at school and not have to worry about it being really, really cold. My teachers were really good. I used to smoke cigarettes in school, and they would tell me that the first 5 minutes on the oval, they wouldn't come up to me, but after that 5 minutes, they would come up to me and catch everybody else smoking with me because DHS were just like, yeah, we know Hayley smokes, we allow it. And it was just the little things like that, not caring how I rocked up to school, kind of finding each and any way to support me in my education. It's really the little things. One of my teachers used to write me starting sentences for my SACs because I sat there and I'm like, I can't do it, can't do this, I'm never at school, I don't know what I'm doing. So she would give me 3 different starting sentences and I would top my whole class. And it was just those little things of motivation, that belief as well. I don't think that I would have made it through school if I didn't have those certain teachers that believed in me as well, that made me feel comfortable and like I had an adult to go to.
Thanks, Hayley. You rock those nails, Hayley, and I'm not sure how you use the computer. Got to keep mine short so I can keep that typing happening fast. Thank you for your insights. Noeleen and Glenn, I'm just going to ask you to give us one thought here in the essence of time. So just one support for a young person who has limited parent support to get them to school. Just one thought there. Go for it, Noeleen. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hayley, for your reflections. I'd love for you to come into our team one time. I feel like we'd learn so much from you. I've got lots, but one would probably be kind of similar to, I think, what Richard was saying before. If we look through a global lens about what the barriers are for young people, a young person, it can feel really overwhelming. So being specific is really important. I think, you don't have to be a clinician to do therapeutic work. I think if you can sit with a young person, be present, get some paper out, get some texters out and get some of the barriers down on paper, I think that really helps to kind of be specific about what some of those barriers are, and then you can start to kind of like work through those barriers. Where you can use play or interaction, that's also helpful even for adolescents. Like it's a really kind of, play feels safe, especially for young people that have experienced trauma. So I think getting everything down on paper and being really specific about what those barriers are, and then once you can identify with the young person what the most powerful kind of barrier is, then you can start thinking about intervention and what that might look like and what the most appropriate referral might be. Thanks.
Thanks, Noeleen. Over to you, Glenn, for one thought there.
Thanks, Sally. I guess I learned from the family therapist that when there isn't perhaps parental or family support, how can we widen that net? And I guess one way we can widen that net is thinking about services that might be able to support, teach our program, navigator program, or a couple of ideas. But within school, mentoring. We have good evidence of the benefits of mentoring, to have that adult, sort of, I guess, as Hayley was sort of saying, in the young person's life, and there who can check in on a regular basis. How's home? How's school work going? How's friends? Any other hassles going on? These regular, consistent over a period of a year to 2 years, we know that can benefit young people broadly, including their attendance and, more importantly, engagement sort of in schooling. Is that quick enough?
Great work, Glenn. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Tiffany, you've already talked a little about this, but if you could give us some insight into how school can't impacts a neurodivergent young person.
I'll mute myself so you can hear me. I wasn't sure exactly what this question was asking, so I've decided that really it's asking how can school impact a neurodivergent person, and what contributes to school attendance distress. Also, I guess it's also asking what is the experience of the student too. So I've decided I'll speak to both of those. It's really interesting when we start to listen to students tell us about what's going on for them, that they I've actually developed a resource called Student Stress Investigation, which has just been used by a couple of universities to interview autistic students and ADHDers. And the results are really interesting. We know that School Can't Australia's research shows that, you know, the top 4 difficulties students face, neurodivergent students face, is feeling safe communicating distress, difficulties having distress identified, difficulties communicating that distress, masking, not feeling safe being who they are, and difficulties accessing people and places at school that can help them feel calm again. So there's some real big barriers that students experience in having their needs identified and met. And I think the thing that comes out next in that research from School Can't Australia is difficulties doing schoolwork that's not of interest or doesn't seem to be relevant to the student. And it's interesting that one comes up also when I have conversations in neurotypical spaces. So at the Student Voice Conference in Geelong recently, that was something that students who were, many of them doing quite well at school, were also complaining about difficulties doing schoolwork that's not of interest. The research from Griffith that the Autism Centre of Excellence did with the student stress investigation cards showed that the top stresses included things like the classroom's too loud or quiet, or again, having difficulty doing things that are not of interest came up, difficulties because school is too unpredictable, difficulties because the day is too long, and another one that came up was I often seem okay at school, but I'm not feeling okay, which again speaks to that difficulty of communicating distress or having distress noticed. And thinking about, you know, if you can't, if your distress is not being noticed, then there is no escape from it and the distress continues. You have no power to do something about it. So I think it's really important that we're curious and we find ways, and I love that Richard and Glenn have already mentioned this being curious about what are the barriers, what are the stresses, because it's really important. And there can be difficulties that students experience in naming those things, because often there are a lot of different things. And this is another thing that the research shows, is that on average these students are choosing, well, my personal experience as a social worker is that on average students are identifying between 30 and 50 things, and both lots of research showed that students were identifying just under 40 different difficulties that they're experiencing at school. So it's very overwhelming. There's a lot of things. It's not just one thing that they're struggling with. And for many of those students, it's been difficult for them since even before they started school, even in childcare. When we ask parents at School Can't Australia, you know, thinking back, you know, what were the first signs? They say, well, my child struggled with childcare, or my child was struggling in kindergarten, and not feeling okay about going to kindergarten or childcare. In terms of the impact of this experience of chronic stress on students who are neurodivergent, a lot of them carry shame, very, very, very deep shame. And I've had students say to me, my own daughter said to me, you know, the only day I don't feel ashamed of the fact that I can't go to school is the days when it's the weekend or there's a curriculum day or it's school holidays. Otherwise, I just all day am dwelling on this idea that I'm not doing what's expected of me and I should be at school. Often they develop a very negative sort of self-view. They're spending a lot of time in survival mode, experiencing fight, flight, shutdown responses. There can be a loss of trust in others and a loss of trust in helpers. Lots of students have had adults say to them, well, you know, you just need to try harder. Even parents have had helpers say, you know, well, you need to make home uncomfortable, and then they'll want to go to school. So then we, you know, think about that. We're giving advice to students families that, well, school is unpleasant. Now, well, let's make home unpleasant as well. So they have to choose between the better of the two evils. That's really harmful advice, by the way. Often their distress has been minimised or dismissed. Students feel trapped. They feel they've got no power to change the things that are causing them distress. And they often feel like grown-ups are judging them and just don't understand what it looks like. They can look like, you know, a child curled up in the fetal position in a darkened bedroom, sometimes for very long periods of time. They can look like somebody who's dealing with this inner conflict all the time, where they really, really want to be able to go to school, but they just can't physically make themselves go to school because they're so distressed. They're in fight flight.
Well, there's a couple of angles.
Some students have experienced being punished for their distress. Some have experienced being physically restrained as well, and that damages trust. Some of them have experienced their parents or their caregivers being really angry at them for not being able to go to school, and some have experienced siblings also being very angry, and there's not an awful lot of research into the experience of siblings in this situation and the impacts on them. They're living with a lot of pressure, and they need someone sometimes to say, I'm sorry, we just didn't understand what your needs were at school. We'd like to understand and do better to meet your needs and find a way to assist you to access education in a way that works for you. I'm not sure if I've done my 5 minutes, but
thanks,
I think we're probably
Tiffany.
running
Thank you.
behind time, so
We're
I'll wrap up.
going to bring Richard in on this topic of conversation, Richard, and I'm sure that you've got something else to share here around, you know, the services, the supports for neurodiverse young people.
Thanks, Sally. Just before I start, I'm so sorry. I'm getting some feedback from someone who might have their microphone on. If everyone in the room could just check that they're on mute, that'd be really good. Thank you. Thanks, Sally. Look, this question here about how schools, families, and youth homelessness services can all work together to support neurodivergent students. I think if I can make something complex sound as simple as I possibly can, this is around simply understanding the child. And I think that, you know, this has been a common theme with this discussion here for the past, 58 minutes or so in finding out what that is. So if we've got services who are doing this, it is having those structures in play to be curious and be collaborative in really understanding what this child needs, and then building on that. I've got a case study that I'd like to just share in response to this question, and I'm so glad that Hayley, you shared your story about your mate and trade school, and I know Tiffany and Jodi have mentioned this as well, but I've got this one story of we had this 9-year-old who had diagnosed ASD level 2 and ADHD, and believe it or not, they'd been forcing or pushing to go to a mainstream primary school and had only been attending up to 1 hour a week, sometimes less than that. And the only reason was that this mainstream school was allowing this kid to follow an interest base of running a reptile club. But this poor kid would go to school and he'd have his reptile club and there'd be no one else there other than him and this ed support staff. So sad. However, it kept going, and I guess the hope was that something might stem from it and that might build, and it just didn't. And look, again, as Jodi was saying, changing schools doesn't always solve a problem. Problems can continue to happen. But in this situation, we did. We moved this kid to an alternative setting, and literally overnight, he was attending full-time. He got given a budget to enhance this interest-based project with reptiles. The school ended up getting some actual reptiles in boxes, or those glass cabinets for him to build on and to work with and to talk to other kids in his class. That extended them to him talking to the whole school. This kid now, who was 9 years old at this time, he's now 11, pushing 12, and he goes to present at other schools around Victoria in talking about reptiles and his knowledge of reptiles, and this is all interest-based work. He could not be prouder of what he's doing. He could not be more engaged, and I think it's just a wonderful example of bringing out this interest-based work with this particular kid. So I do love telling that story, because it's we had parents in tears. I never thought this kid would ever get to this point. Look, I think just a few things just to build on this as well is we always encourage schools and care teams to have a roundtable meeting every term, and we try and go for that week 2. Week 1 of the term is a bit, just settling in. Week 2, everyone's a bit more focused. And I think when you get that pattern in play, you can get some consistency. Again, looking at that engagement data, what's working and what's not working, and how can we work on this. Having those 2 simple questions on that agenda of, even with the allied health staff as well, what are you currently working on? And what are your recommendations for moving forward? Are really common. And then look, coming into some of that, which I think was mentioned before, we can have our accommodation guides. We can have our sensory guides that are going to help these kids on those little 1%ers as they go through as well. But I think having that consistency across the team is really important to getting traction with this.
Thanks, Richard. And we're not going to give you a break just yet, Richard. We're going to keep you going for the next question. Could you just talk us through any services or alternatives that are there to help students return to education?
Thanks, Sally. Look, I think that looking at services, I think that part of this work, as we've just been listening to, does take a little bit of time and a little bit of understanding. So I think looking at services and alternatives of people that are going to provide this support for parents, and they're going to help them to navigate this change, because as we've heard, it's a very hard thing to be doing. Finding services that can work directly with schools and knowing how education system works, we find is really important as well. Finding services that will connect allied health workers to make sure that their work is included as a part of the piece of the pie here, in order to be able to create a re-engagement plan. Finding services who, and in Cartfane School, we talk about this and having those partnerships being such an important piece of those 4 pillars. I think Glenn was talking about this, and before moving forward with any of this work, it's finding a service or someone who can make sure that we've got students, parents, schools, and allied health staff all on the same page, and then we can start building a re-engagement plan. So considering programs that are taking the time to work with and listen with students. I know Tiffany does a lot of that work with her student stress investigation cards, and we use those. In fact, I've got some here on me right now that we use a lot in our work to support that. That's been really helpful and useful. Yet we do also encourage, like Glenn was saying, having that one person at the school and having those mentors in place. Quite often, if we find that we do get success with getting a young person back to school, that the work's not done there. We need to change gears and move forward to be able to make sure that that's really sustainable and that they're really being listened to, and it's really going to go forward and not go backwards. So that mentoring is really important. Navigator program was mentioned before. That's a great one as well. And even some of those, whether they're stepping stones or ongoing, online courses and virtual schools, distance education, even homeschooling as well. We've had quite a few of our cohort who have used that as a stepping stone back into face-to-face, or who've stayed there and find ways to be social in the community as well. And what has been great to see an increase of is, schools like Hester, where there's these flexible learning options as well. So I encourage anyone who's working with these families and young people to make sure that they go and do a few visits, just so you make sure that it's really what is going to suit you, so that you can get that young person excited and motivated about attending again.
Thanks, Richard, so much. We're moving through our last question, and we've got Glenn, Hayley and Noeleen to finish us off for today. If each of you could think about and talk to us about what does best practice look like for supporting students who are struggling to engage in education. Glenn, over to you.
Thanks very much, Sally. I guess for me, it starts with collaboration between the young person, parents, school, and any external sort of providers, and sort of keeping the young person at the centre of that, as we've heard. I think, further that sort of developing up that strong sort of trusting relationship with the young person is the vital sort of foundation. And then, as we've heard, we need to understand the challenges and get a good sort of grip on that. We need to consider the educational context, as I think Richard was sort of saying. Sometimes it seems like the grass is greener. So we have to go into that quite sort of thoughtfully. As we also heard, problems can sort of follow kids from one school to the next. So after we've got that sort of set up, I think we then move to our problem solving. Thinking about those supports, what does young person sort of need to make education a success, whether that's sort of mentoring, is it mental health support, is it even sort of wraparound sort of services, and also to look at physical health. We can't ignore that. Most sort of, if we look very broadly at absences, most are explained by illness. So how is the young person's sort of physical health? And beyond that, I think we need to look at fostering that sort of sense of belonging at school, where the young person's sort of feeling very welcomed and has a connection with one or more sort of staff members. I think the other thing is to set things up for an experience of success. A lot of the young people I work with, have concluded that they're dumb and they can't learn because of their experiences or gaps in their education. So I think we need to really set things up for success, and whether that's sort of following interests or scaffolding learning sort of early as they sort of transition back into school is really important. And my last point is to be persistent. This takes time, and we need to think of models that provide longer term support, and because these attendance sort of challenges can sort of pop up and down over time. So thinking long term, planning at the start of each sort of school year, checking in with young people and families about what supports they need ongoing. I'll leave it there. Thanks very much, Sally.
Thanks, Glenn. Noeleen, we're going to move to you because I'd love to finish off our session with Hayley, if that's okay. So Noeleen, over to you.
No worries. I think that it's important to have a multi-systemic ecological approach. It shouldn't be all on the young person to do things to remove the barriers. We need to think about the environments in which they exist and how influential those systems are. I think, as Hayley kind of touched on before, what was really evident to me was how powerful the relationships within that school system is. There's a famous quote by American psychiatrist, people may know him, Bruce Perry, and he said, relationships are the agents of change. And I always think about that quote. I used to think about it a lot in Resi, and it's so powerful and so important, because really, like, relationships are going to help with growth, they're going to help with healing, are going to help with social transformation. So how can we nurture those relationships? Agency as well, like, again, Hayley, perfect example of the young person is the expert in their life. We need to evoke the strengths that they have. We're not the experts, we need to lead from the back. We're working alongside, we're not doing for, we're not creating a dependency, we're making sure that we're empowering them to make the steps that they need to make to achieve their goals. I think that's really important. I think sometimes we can over-service, unintentionally with good intent, but we just need to ensure that we're always thinking about being person-centered and what the young people actually need. I think being realistic as well about what our goals are and what the young person's goals are and what their needs are. Realistically speaking, if a young person is disengaged for a long time from school, if they haven't attended school in 2 years, them attending full-time mainstream school is probably a stretch, and we don't want to set them up for failure. So being really thinking outside the box about all the different options that are available, all the flexible learning environments that are available to the school. And then finally, just positive reinforcement. Exactly, again, what Hayley said, if they can get their foot through the door and they haven't been to school in a long time, that is a massive win. So we need to really celebrate the wins and support with reinforcing that. Thank you.
Hayley, so appropriate that you have the last word for us today. Can you talk us through this question and your thoughts here?
Yes. I've heard a lot about systems today and services, and I just want to say that I only think that services are a short-term answer, not a long-term answer. No one person wants so many professionals in their lives when they've already experienced so many other professionals. By going to services, we're teaching young people how to be service reliant. So instead, how about we try and find those assets that already exist within our communities and that will continue to exist after services? And then to the question, I think it's hard to focus on our futures and the good things in our lives when everybody's so focused on the problems or the issues that arise. As a young person, I understand that I'm struggling more than anybody else will ever understand that as well. What are my strengths in that situation? My abilities in life are based on the beliefs that people around me have for me. So if you believe I can do amazing things in life, I definitely will. But if you don't believe that, then I won't. My next thing is, I think it comes to compromise, finding a young person's interest and really working off that. I work with a community connector in the Better Futures / Leaving Care space who works with young people on a whole different level. He'll jump on Fortnite because a lot of his young people are neurodivergent, very introverted, but they love playing games on Xbox and PS and all that. So he'll jump on and he'll have a 2-hour conversation with them while playing games. My nephew, he's neurodivergent, has experienced a lot of trauma and the child protection system. But he also loves playing games, and I tell him still to this day, if he can't read the title of the game, we can't play it. That, in the long run, taught him how to read because he loves playing games, but he needs to learn to read the title before he plays the games. So it motivated him to learn how to read. Every day that he didn't go to school when I used to live with him, I would set my laptop up on the table. I would tell him to come sit next to me. And depending on what time of the year it was, whether his birthday was coming up or it was Christmas or something like that, I'd pull out a catalogue and I'd say, okay, look at the toys you want or the things that you want. You need to be able to read them and then write them down and then put the price next to it. And at the end, I want you to add all the money together and see how much money you need to buy all these presents for yourself. He would sit there for a whole day and do it all because it interested him. It was something that was fun for him. And it goes back to the point I said at the start, meeting a young person where they're at. They are whole, they are capable, and not one thing works for every young person. It's just the most minute things change so much in a young person's life. I had a dyslexic dance teacher. Amazing. She was so good. But the rest of my peers couldn't understand her, and I could. I knew everything she was saying. And so she used to say it, and when my peers got confused, I would relay it to my peers. Not a single one of us in that class got lower than a B grade on our theory exam. It was insane, but it was because of the way we worked together. We supported each other. We had a really, really close relationship. Even with our teacher, she would walk into the classroom, we'd be playing tag or dressing up in stupid costumes or something. She would walk into the room, we'd all sit down straight away because she was a good teacher. She met us where we were at, we met her where she was at, and it worked in a really, really, really good way by the end of the year. We're all so supportive of each other. If one of us needed to leave class, we'd just leave. We wouldn't interrupt the class, and then another student would go out and follow and just be like, hey, are you okay? Do you need to go see the school counsellor? Or like, are you going to come back? What do I need to go tell miss? And it would just be that. And I mean, we were all in the same friendship group as well, which was kind of a big bonus. But it's the simple things like that, working with somebody based on where they're at, where their learning levels is, how they learn. An interesting theory would be advantaged thinking. We use that in Better Futures, and the way that it works has literally changed my life. Yeah, so just meeting a young person where they're at, treating them as whole and capable, and actually being interested. And I think the one thing that goes down to that, no matter what, is belief. All it takes, And I say this at every forum, being a kid in care, all it takes is that one person who's always in your corner that believes. You don't give up on a toddler after the third or second time they try to walk. You sit there and you stay there with your child. You teach them how to do it. You guide them through it. You stand by their side. So why aren't we doing this for all other young people? Why aren't we showing that unconditional belief that young people can get to where they want to be? And sometimes it is just that belief that they need.
Thanks, Hayley. There's a reason why we finished with you. You're going to leave a smile on all of our faces as we go into the rest of our workday. Cassie, I believe I'm handing over to you now for any questions and answers. Thanks, panel members.
Thanks so much, Sally. Great facilitation. Thank you, panel. We do have some questions. Have I got everyone up? Yep. We do have some questions that have popped up in Slido, so I'll read the top question. Outside of the Navigator program, what other assertive outreach programs are available for young people in the inner east who are experiencing school can't?
Can I put an answer to that one?
Sure.
Go for it, Richard.
To jump in there. Look, Can't Face School is another one, I have to say, for that. A lot of our work is quite similar to Navigator, not completely. We work nationally, and we have staff that are definitely based out in the east to support that.
I also know that particularly for kids that have a care experience or young people that are leaving care, etc., the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare have a small team called Raising Expectations, where they hire lived experience mentors to help other young people who are in care systems and services or have those experiences in life to complete education and tertiary education from about 15 years old. And it's a really cool thing to do.
Also, I think Anglicare have got a group down in the east as well, just to add to that.
Thanks, everyone. In case there's nothing else to add there, I'll go on to the next question. All right. The next question is for Richard. They've asked, what's that blue box of cards called? I missed it.
Oh, well, I need to give this question to Tiffany. So I did some training with Tiffany, and a couple of my staff did some training with Tiffany. And yeah, I bought some cards, but Tiffany, you got to answer that one.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, student stress investigation. It's a box of 96 cards, and each one lists a different school-based stressor or difficulty that students experience. And it's arisen out of my work as a social worker, but also as a parent carer who's got a child who is currently home educating and unable to attend school. So, yeah. And also my experiences in School Can't Australia. Can I just say the question about supports in the eastern suburbs too, I think for parents and carers and those supporting young people in the home, School Can't Australia's peer support is excellent for supporting parents and carers too.
Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everyone. All right. So the next question. Any advice on supporting a young person who appears to be struggling with their mental health, is refusing to engage in any supports or leave the house?
Go for it, Tiffany.
Look, I think it's really hard when they're that distressed, and sometimes what they need is connection with their adult, with people who care about them. I don't think that you can force someone to receive support, and sometimes there's a period of repair that needs to happen. and building trust and building relationship, and that takes time. I think also we need to be mindful of what burnout is and what burnout looks like and how it differs a little bit from depression, but sometimes just exhaustion can come about from having to manage chronic stress as well. And so rest is necessary. Sometimes engaging in things that the young person enjoys and finds, fills their cup up. Those sorts of things can help restore energy as well. So there's a time and place for therapy and reaching out. But yeah, when someone's severely distressed, that's not the time. Yeah. Although I think, it's helpful often for parents and carers to seek support in that situation.
Glenn, you've got some thoughts here?
Yeah, look, often a very tricky case, situation, this one, and not unfamiliar. I think it does come back to some of those principles we've collectively been sort of speaking about earlier in terms of having a good understanding of sort of what's happening and what those drivers are. But I guess the thing I wanted to add is there might be some goals or things that the young person sort of can achieve before school, and that might be engaging in the community. Maybe it's connecting with others in a community sort of space or some sport or other ways of sort of engaging. So it might be about thinking about, okay, well, we want to get to school ultimately. What are sort of some of the challenges this young person's sort of experiencing that they can perhaps engage in sort of before or sort of the build towards school? And maybe it's about if they're able to sort of engage in any kind of learning outside of the school kind of setting or have some success, tutoring sort of in the home, connection sort of with peers, these sorts of other, I guess, competencies and achievements can really build towards school.
Hayley?
I was just gonna say that you don't stop offering that opportunity. You don't stop offering that support. You don't stop offering re-engagement into education. But it might just be a case of the young person's not ready yet. And I can guarantee if you still have those opportunities offered to the young person, when they're ready and they feel capable, they'll take them up.
Thanks, Hayley. Cassie, have we got some more questions?
Yes, we do. Next question is, so many things depend on the school and education system. So why can't we change the education system?
Oh, we'd all love to. Jodi, have you got some insights into that? Jodi, I can't hear you. Still can't hear you, Jodi. I'm happy to jump in here if that's okay, because I blurted out we'd all love to. We certainly would love to. I think for us at HESTA, we really shouldn't have to exist. And so it's about time that the system, the department listened to the fact that young people need school only different. And I know that many of us are advocating toward that. Hayley, you've got a thought?
I think not only does it start with us, but our communities as well. If there's enough of us making noise saying that we want this to change and we're consistent about it, things will eventually change. I know that for a fact. Better Futures is here because young people for decades were asking about it. We finally had the opportunity to meet with a minister and we said we need support. Like, you wouldn't give up on your kid at 18, so why do we face that trouble, those traumas too? And now there's not even statewide, across Australia, it's nationwide support until 21. And that started with young people who just didn't stop asking for it. So if we want to see those changes, we have to band together. We have to get our communities to band together, and we just have to start making as much noise as we can around that.
Richard.
Thank you. I, for some reason, can't raise my hand other than physically doing it. I think that's a fantastic question, and thank you for asking it. And there's some obviously some big picture things that need to be happening on a slow burn. But I do encourage you all just to go and visit places individually. There are some fantastic schools out there, and there's some fantastic principals. There are fantastic inclusion workers who are doing some awesome work. And again, it's been mentioned quite a few times in this discussion, you're finding that one person who really cares, that can make such a huge difference. And so don't lose that hope, because they are absolutely out there. And when you can build that relationship with them, then you're going to get some traction. Yep, there's some bigger things we know that need to change. And those of us who are in that world are slowly trying to make those changes with that. But I think that's just a good bit of hope to put out there for that one. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Cassie, I think we've got one more question.
Yes, there is one more, and if you did want to log on to Slido and pop another question in, there's probably time for one or two more. Oh, another one just appeared. The top comment at the moment is an option. So Anglicare Teach, a capital R, is an amazing but very expensive and unattainable without child protection orders. So I don't know if there's any comments on that. Okay, and then the last question that we've got that's popped up just now is families and children experiencing school can't are often experiencing complex stresses. How do you pick where to start?
I don't like the word complex, so I'm going to challenge you on this. Is the problems that these people are facing complex, or is the way you deal with it complex? That's something we ask in our work all the time.
Thanks, Hayley. Tiffany, some thoughts?
Well, I think it's really important to start with what they think is important. I think, identifying the students' top priorities for what they think would be helpful and what's causing them difficulty, and also identifying, any parent-carer difficulties and barriers and stresses and support needs, and trying to put those wraparound supports in place. It's really important.
Cassie, I'm looking for instruction. Are we calling questions to a close? What's our plan?
That was the last question that's popped up in Slido, so we can probably leave it there. I've just got a few closing words, and I'll just quickly share my screen. Bear with me. Okay. Okay, there we go. So thank you, panelists, our facilitators. Sally did an amazing job, and audience for being here today and taking time out from your work. Really appreciate it. We hope you found the discussion valuable. I'll keep a record of any unanswered questions and aim to get them addressed after the event if any more pop through. And hopefully this may inform, a future event. But please take a moment to complete a short survey using the QR code. Sorry to give you another QR code. Just to let us know what you thought about this event, and any suggestions for future professional development opportunities. I'll send the QR code afterwards by email along with any of the resources or organisations that were mentioned today. So hopefully that's come up on your phones, the QR code. I'll stop sharing and and just say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Cassie. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.